Okay, let's dive in. Today we're exploring some source material that really digs into something I think a lot of us have felt if you've watched Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Just the absolute heartbreak the show can deliver. These sources we've got, they're all about pinpointing the most devastating moment.
Oh, right. The moments that really stick with you.
Yeah.
And they try to figure out why is that it? Why they hit so hard.
Exactly. And what's really striking is the language they use. They're talking emotional trauma, even emotional scar tissue.
Wow, scar tissue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. It really tells you something about the connection people have with this show, doesn't it?
It really does. So our mission here, based on these sources, is to unpack why these specific moments felt so, well, devastating.
And maybe what that says about Grey's as a whole, like how it pulls off that kind of emotional storytelling.
Spot on. We'll go through the key moments the sources highlight and then maybe look at the bigger picture, the themes they point out about the show's impact.
Okay. Sounds good, but fair warning, yeah. Some of these are tough to revisit.
Oh, definitely. Even just reading about them in the source material.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough. So the first one the sources really call out is George O'Malley's death.
Ah, George. Yeah, season 5 finale that was. The John Doe reveal.
Right. The guy who saved the woman from the bus, horribly injured, and nobody knows who he is.
Until Meredith figures it out. And the sources point to that specific moment, don't they? When she sees the 007 on his hand.
They do. That's the trigger. And what they really emphasize is just the shock of it.
Yeah, unexpected is putting it mildly.
The sources say it hit like a truck.
Yeah.
Because George was, he was George. Sweet, a bit awkward maybe, but the good guy.
And then he dies this incredibly heroic, but also brutal and anonymous way. Just wasn't what you expected for him at all.
Totally flipped the script. Took a character you felt you knew inside out and just made the pain really sharp, like the sources say.
Definitely. Okay, so moving to another one the sources call out is just completely destroying viewers. Denny Duquette.
Oh, Denny. Izzy's storyline. The sources recap the whole thing cutting the LVAD wire.
Thinking she saved him. All that hope.
And then he just dies. After she got all dressed up for the hospital prom in that pink dress, finds him gone.
The sources, yeah, they don't really pull punches on this one. They use words like brutal.
Peak Shonda Payne, I think one said.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
And they say it destroyed us. There's a real sense of shared trauma there.
And you know what the sources point to as a key reason why this one lingers so much?
Let me guess. The music.
You got it. Snow Patrol, chasing cars.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The sources literally call it a trigger, which shows how, effectively the show welds that music to the emotion. It gets stuck in your head viscerally.
Mm-hmm. That music memory link is powerful stuff.
Ah.
Okay, so speaking of things that are hard to shake, Lexie and Mark, the sources definitely talk a lot about them.
The plane crash. Ugh, just brutal. First Lexie, trapped under the wreckage.
Dying right there, with Mark holding her hand.
And then Mark, he makes it back, seems okay for a bit, but then he fades too. Succumbs later on.
And the sources, they really highlight the cruelty of it, right?
Yeah.
Because they were so close to finally being happy together.
Yeah, just about to be happy is how they put it. Soulmates. Makes the loss feel extra tragic.
Definitely. And the sources pick out those details, like Lexie's last I love you.
And Mark holding her hand. Yeah. The sources use words like raw, gut-wrenching.
Iconic, painful, legendary even. It clearly left a huge mark.
They even mentioned that line from Mark's later video message, if you love someone, tell them. How much heavier that feels after losing Lexie.
Right. It wasn't just one death. It was this drawn-out double tragedy. Really amplified everything.
Okay, another huge one the sources cover extensively. Derek McDreamy.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
that was a big one. A shock for a lot of people. The sources remind us how it happened. He saves people at an accident.
Does this amazing heroic thing and then boom, gets hit by a truck right after.
But the sources argue, and this seems key, that what made it so devastating wasn't just the death itself, but the fact that it felt preventable.
Right. The whole issue with the hospital he was taken to. Staff making mistakes, not following the right procedures.
According to the sources, that detail just made the loss feel 10 times worse. Because it didn't have to happen that way.
Yeah, and the sources really hone in on the way that episode unfolded. The slow unraveling, they call it.
And making the viewer sit in the grief alongside Meredith.
They argue that as painful as it was, it made the episode devastating in the best way, forced you to really process it.
And again, the music cue, knocking on heaven's door.
Yeah.
The sources point that out too, how deliberate that choice felt.
Oh, absolutely. They knew exactly what they were doing. Okay, one more. The sources single out, maybe not always top of every list, but highlighted for its unique impact. April and Jackson losing baby Samuel.
Ah, yeah. That whole storyline was incredibly tough. But the specific moment the sources focus on is the baptism, right?
Exactly. Baptizing him, knowing he wasn't going to survive because of his condition, osteogenesis imperfecta type 2.
And the sources describe that scene, that whole arc actually, as maybe one of the most realistic portrayals of that kind of grief ever on network TV.
Yeah, what stands out for them is that it wasn't over the top. It wasn't melodramatic.
It was tender, quiet, deeply human, I think were the words used.
hmm They talk about the helplessness you felt watching it, and they praise the acting, calling it unreal and how authentic it felt.
It was incredibly powerful in its quietness.
So looking at all these moments together
Mm.
and thinking about what the sources are saying,
Yeah.
what is it about Grey's that lets it create these scenes, these moments that, like I said, leave emotional scar tissue?
Well, the big theme that keeps coming up in the sources is it's about character investment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
They argue the show makes you care, like really care, because you spend so much time with these people. Years sometimes.
You see them live, love, mess up, grow. Season after season, you're on the journey with them.
Exactly. And the sources connect that long-term relationship directly to why the tragedies hit so hard. It's not just a plot twist for some random character.
No, it feels personal, like it's happening to someone you actually know, someone you're invested in.
Right. The sources frame it as truly effective emotional storytelling, not just, shock for shock's sake.
The pain feels earned somehow, even though it's awful.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And like we saw with Denny and with Derek, the sources keep coming back to the music too. The show's skill in picking that perfect song.
The perfect playlist, they call it, to just lock in that emotion, make the sadness stick even more.
For sure. So if you boil down the message from these sources, it seems like the show's power to just, devastate comes from that commitment to characters over the long haul.
Getting you invested, making their heartbreaks feel like yours.
And the sources even have this kind of playful warning for anyone starting the show fresh, right?
Huh. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
You're not ready. Stock up on tissues.
Prepare to scream into a pillow. Maybe don't get too attached.
Which, honestly, having just gone through these moments again via the sources, that advice feels pretty spot on. That depth of grief they talked about, especially with April and Jackson, it really resonates.
It does. And, it raises this interesting question, kind of building on what the sources are saying about connecting so deeply with fictional suffering.
Yeah.
Why do we seek out stories like this? Stories that we know are going to put us through the emotional wringer, make us feel this kind of pain. What is it about experiencing that heartbreak, but safely, through a screen that keeps us coming back?
That's a really potent thought to end on, I think. This look at the sources on Grey's Anatomy's saddest moments.
Yeah.
It definitely gives you a lot to think about regarding how powerful long-form TV can be.